So, good evening, everyone. Again, we will start with quieting our mind with a mindful breathing exercise. Then we can think, even though sometimes life seems very long, it can be very short. Time passed very quickly. And we never know when is our last day in this world. It can manifest and come suddenly, unexpectedly, from nowhere. Therefore, we should be prepared all the time. So we are ready. Anytime it manifests, we are ready and prepared. And the best way to prepare is engage in our Dharma practice. There's nothing more meaningful than practice the Dharma. Not only practicing the Dharma, but the Mahayana Dharma, the Bodhisattva's path. And in order to practice correctly, continuously, we need to know how to practice the gradual path, step by step. And for that very reason that we are studying the Lam-Rim, the stages of the path. And we are studying not just to understand intellectually, but to apply in our everyday life, in our practice meditations. And may our act of listening to the Dharma coming together here become cause and conditions to attain our highest potential, the fully awakened state, as quick as possible. So we can be most benefit to all sentient beings in oneself. Okay.
Page 73. We'll do the first verse once. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakti clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Page 76, the Heart of Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate
to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling on the mass of Bauchit mountain in Rajgira, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Aryavalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of profound perfection and wisdom, and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Aryavalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage trained who wish to practice the activity of profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and then the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Aryavalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of profound perfection of wisdom should look upon life like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates, also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no eye element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignoring, no extension of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who died in 30 times also manifestly, completely awakened to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment, in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared.
Tayata Om Gate Gate
Paragate,
Paragate
Parasamgate,
Bodhi
Bodhisoha,
Soha
Shariputra, the
the
Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, should train in the perfection
of wisdom like
that.
that.
Then the Bhagavan arose from the
concentration
concentration and commanded the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding the entirety, along the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, Gandharva, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan.
Page 97 at the bottom, or the top of 98, the short mandala offering.
Sashiteki Choshimeto Tarira Lenshi Nitegem Adi Sangye Shinto Mite Uwai Dogun Nanta Shinla Chepasho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kandi Tayami.
Refuge in bodhicitta, once in English, twice in Tibetan. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Chodan Soki Chonam La Chanju Bardu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chonin Gipe Sonamgi Droga Pencher Sangye Druparsho Sangye Chodan Soki Chonam La Chanju Bardu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Choshe Gipe Sonamgi Droga Pencher Sangye Druparsho.
Kanje dujane zone, taadam jabang beze, dambe sunde te zebe, godam de la cha cha. So, the purpose of the Bodhisattvas to engage in a spiritual path to practice the Dharma is in order to achieve fully enlightenment, so that we can, they can be most benefit to each and every sentient beings. And in order to achieve that fully awakened or fully enlightened state, then one need to cultivate the bodhicitta mind, induced by the great compassion and loving kindness. And having cultivated the bodhicitta mind, then taking the, aspiring, bodhicitta vows, precepts, and then again, even that is wonderful and great, but just by bodhicitta itself, just by having that bodhicitta mind and that taking that precept itself is not enough. And then in order to achieve fully enlightenment, and then recognizing in order to achieve fully enlightenment, then driven by that bodhicitta mind, then one must engage in the actions of such a practice of 6 perfections. And then we have a strong wish to engage in that 6 perfection, then one takes engaging both vows, and then after having taken that, then one engaged into the practice of six perfections. And so, and then as we went through, last week, here Lama Tsongkhapa explained how all the Bodhisattvas practice kind of summarize and condense into the practice of six perfections from many different point of view. From the point of view of reducing the delusions and obscuration, from the point of view of, engaging the method, the path, the full path, the full method, in terms of, so there many different point of view. So I think we went through that, why particularly practice of six perfections. So I think we are page number 160, and then where it says sixth, how the perfections are contained in the teacher trainings. So again, the practice of six perfection can kind of contain in the three higher training, the higher training of moral or ethical discipline, and higher training of concentration, and higher training of the wisdom in terms of that. And so here, within the six perfections, the perfections of, training in moral discipline or ethical discipline is the practice of perfection, higher training of moral discipline. So that is clear. And so then, you are able to practice your moral discipline or ethical discipline better and more purely if you don't have attachment to things, objects, And so when you practice a generosity, you practice generosity to let go of not following the object of attachment, and through that letting go of attachment and practicing the giving and generosity mind with generosity. So with that practice, then when you have less attachment to through the practice of generosity, you learn to kind of let it go, give, share, instead of holding very tightly due to attachments, not being able to let it go. So when you practice that, then you have less attachment to those different objects. And when you are less attached, then you are able to keep your moral discipline better. We are unable to keep our moral discipline, vows, precepts, because of lot of time due to attachments. And so therefore, that generous practice helps to the practice of moral discipline. So in that way, the practice of generosity is like the foundations. Here it has translated accumulation ethic. I think the translator kind of got a little bit confused with the same. In Tibetan, there is Tsok, and it could mean different meaning according to different contexts. One, it is accumulations, Tsok Ni, the two accumulations. But also, also it means preliminary or foundations, for example, Shineki Tsok, like for example, the preparation or preliminary for the meditative concentrations or special insight. There are some required, like right environment and less, those are called Tsok. And so I think here maybe it were accumulations, I think is not the correct translation, I think. Because in Tibetan word is the same word, but it means different according to different contexts. So it means generosity, like the prerequisite, preliminary or foundations for that, act as that way. And when you practice the moral discipline or ethical discipline, when you practice that, to refrain from hurting and harming others, that is the main practice of moral discipline or ethical discipline, is to restrain or refrain from hurting and harming others through your physical actions, verbal actions, and mental actions. So when we try to do that, sometimes people respond in a very negative way, unkind way. So then we lose our mind, and then we started to hurt and harm them back, retaliate them with hurting and harming them. But if you have patience, you will not retaliate that way. You will not hurt and harm them back because of your practice of patience. Because of your practice of patience, your mind will be not so disturbed by their response or their actions, their behavior. And when your mind is not so disturbed, then you will not respond in a negative way, harmful way. And when you don't respond in a harmful, negative way, then you don't break your practice of moral discipline, hurting and harming them. And so in that way, the patience is like a retinue, the kind of side practice for the moral discipline, So in these cases, when you talk from three higher training point of view, the moral discipline is the main practice of this higher training of moral discipline, and the generosity practice acting as the foundations, and then patience for that practice, and patience acting as a retinue, support that practice. So in that way, and then of course, the practice of meditative stabilizations is a training of meditative concentration, shamatha, so that is one of the higher training. And whereas the wisdom, training in the wisdom, so again, the perfection of wisdom is the training in the wisdom, and whereas the perfection of joyous effort in the virtues is included in all three higher training. It supports all three higher training. It supports the moral discipline, it supports the meditative concentration, and it supports the wisdom. In that way, it is included within the all. And in that way, all the six perfections are kind of explained in the context of three higher trainings. And so then there is the, quotations from Maitreya's Ornament of Realizations as previously. And so is here Lama Tsongkhapa saying is important to understand why specifically six perfections, in terms of that, why six perfections, and then we all went through from different perspectives why those six perfections. So in order to fully complete welfare of oneself and all others, we need those six perfections, as Lama Tsongkhapa already explains, and then also already explained, how all those six perfections act as a method, as a path, by whatever vehicle you are abiding in, but by following those six perfections practice, then as a method and as a path. And through that, we are able to gather all the basics to accomplish any training of welfare of temporary and ultimate welfare of oneself, temporary and ultimate welfare of all others. Also, all these six perfections kind of contains all the Mahayana teachings. It kind of contains all the method, you know, and it also contains all the training, such as 3 higher training and so forth. So we should understand, you know, all those within those 6 perfections, that it possesses all these different aspects of the path within the 6 perfection, in terms of method, all the method, in terms of all the Mahayana teaching, in terms of fulfilling welfare of oneself and others, all that. And so understanding that is important. And so we should think that again and again, again and again in meditations, you know, contemplating and meditating again and again until we have great certainty, you know, and understanding these are the essential point of all the Bodhisattva path. When you understand that these 6 perfections are the very essential point of all the Bodhisattva's practice and path, then we will not be kind of diverted from those practices, you know. Instead, we will focus on those practices by understanding these are the essential point of the practice of the Bodhisattva's path, and that. And so then, in addition that the specific order, why? So here, Lama Tsongkhapa explained by relying on many others Indian sources, why this among all the Bodhisattvas, so many practices, how it contains within the 6 perfections from many different angles, perspective. Now, not only 6 specific numbers, but why that kind of specific order? Generosity first, and then secondly, moral discipline and patience, joyous effort, meditative concentration, wisdom. There is some kind of sequences in that, and so explaining that, you know. So it has 3 points, as it says, and the process in order which they arise, you know, in the practices, you know. So again, it is a little bit almost, we already kind of went a little bit before, you know. If we have the practice of generosity, when you engage in practice of generosity, we don't run after the objects. We don't cling and get attached to the objects, okay? And if we are not attached to the material things or resources, whatever external, internal, different resources, you know, then, as I mentioned before, then you will be able to practice the moral discipline better, you know. For example, you know, a lot of time, let's say, why we are unable to, a lot of people, why they cannot practice the moral discipline of not killing, taking life of others, why they cannot refrain from hurting and harming by taking the life of others. If you look a lot of time, of course, sometimes people take out of anger, you know, but a lot of time is out of, you know, out of attachment to the meat, attachment to the fur, attachment to the medicinal things, the medicinal, whatever you call, resource, I don't know how, what. Yeah, different medicine, because they are used for different medicines, you know, so therefore sometimes it is attachment to that. Sometimes it's attachment to just entertainment, sport, you know. And so a lot of time we hurt others, harm others, take others' life, and unable to practice the moral discipline or refraining from taking lives because of attachment. In terms of same thing, stealings, you know, out of attachment we steal, and not being able to keep the vows, precepts, or moral discipline, or refraining from stealing, or sexual misconduct, you know. All of that, if you look at it, then it comes from being attached. So if you are less attached through the practice of generosity, it becomes easier for us to practice and perfect the practice of moral discipline. And so that is how generosity, the practice of generosity, help to the better practice of moral discipline or ethical discipline, you know. And then if you have strong moral discipline, the practice of moral discipline, ethical discipline, and because through that, the practice of moral discipline, because you don't try to, you try to restrain or refrain from hurting and harming others, even when someone is being mean to you, unkind to you with their actions, with their speech, with their attitude, still because you don't want to hurt and harm them, because you want to refrain from hurting and harming them, so you will not respond with anger and violent way, And so therefore, then it becomes easier to practice the patience, because you will be more, that help you to be more patient, not to respond or retaliate harmful way, the way they respond to us in harm. And so then that helps as a to have a better, stronger practice of patience. Someone is, when someone is not nice and then you want to say something, immediately you have a wish to respond something harsh word, or sometimes maybe even physically, then because of your practice of moral discipline, I shouldn't hurt, I shouldn't harm, I should refrain from wrong speech, I should refrain from wrong physical behavior, I should refrain from unhealthy mental behavior or actions. And so then we are able to kind of refrain from it being too strong, and through that then you are able to practice, it helps you to practice the patience, stronger patience. And if you have patience, then when we practice patience, then we practice patience with people or sentient beings who harms, patience with our own hardship, difficulties, being patient with whatever challenges, hardship, whatever difficulties that we might encounter in our life, and the practice of patience to endure certain hardship in engaging in Dharma, in engaging in both sets of way of life or path. So those are three kind of patience. So when you have those kind of patience, then you will not be despair and easily give up when you face some challenges, difficulties in your life. You will not be easily despair and easily discouraged. You will not give up just because it's not easy. While practicing the Dharma, while trying to be kind, compassion, while trying to practice the Bodhisattva way of life, it is not going to be easy, and sometimes we will face a lot of challenges. But because your practice of patience, you will not be discouraged, despair, and easily give up. And when you don't do that, then there is more continuity, perseverance in your practice. At the moment, our practice, there is no continuity in perseverance. One day is good and next day is bad. 1 week is good, 1 week is bad. 1 month is good, 1 month is fluctuating all the time. There is no continuity because we get discouraged. One day you have good experience, you get encouraged. Next day you don't have good experience and you get discouraged. I didn't have any nice experience. What is the point of meditating? I've been meditating for weeks, months, nothing special happening. You get discouraged, and then those things. And so when you have patience, you wouldn't get so discouraged easily. And then that gives you the practice continuity. and perseverance, continuity, and joyous effort in your practice. And so that help, patience help to have a perseverance or joyous effort in our practice, in our virtues. So that practice. And then when you have perseverance and joyous effort in your practice, in your meditations, day and night, then, our concentration, meditative concentration, to able to focus on whatever virtuous object that we direct, will be able to actualize very easily. Not having that kind of perseverance and not having the joyous effort in our meditation and practice is the main obstacle to develop shamatha, karma abiding. That is same in generally all realization, but especially true with the meditative concentrations, especially with meditative concentrations. Your practice cannot be so fluctuating like that. If you really want to develop meditative concentration, you need to have more steady, continuous practice, and joyous effort allow us to have that, the perseverance to that meditative. So it becomes easier and quick to actualize karma abiding, shamatha, when you have that kind of perseverance. And of course, any other realizations. And when you have, meditative equipoise or shamatha, karma abiding, then that will lead you to have a special insight, the wisdom of special insight that relies the ultimate reality. Without the shamatha, you cannot have the insight, special insight, the wisdom of special insight. And so therefore, shamatha allow you to have that special insight, the wisdom of special insight. And so that you can see how previous practice act as a foundations, as a supporting to the next level of the practice. And that is why the sequences in that way. One of the reasons why the sequences is explained that way. But it doesn't mean, that is more kind of in general, but it doesn't mean that other practice does not also support and help the other sequences as well. When you have a realization of emptiness, that will help you to have a stronger practice of generosity, better practice of moral discipline, patience, all of that will also help. But in generally, for ordinary beings, beginner, that is more kind of sequences, And then in another why is explaining that specific order, the order in the term of inferior superior, the earlier inferior and later superior. So generosity is, the practice of moral discipline is more superior than the generosity. The practice of patience is more superior than the practice of moral discipline. The practice of joyous effort to the virtues is more superior than the practice of patience. The practice of meditative concentrations is more superior than the joyous effort. And the practice of wisdom is more superior than the shamatha, the karma abiding. So in that term, in terms of the earlier being inferior and later being superior, that is also one of the reasons why it is explained that way. And then in terms of grosser and subtler, earlier practice of among six professionals, easier to engage in, and the later than the later ones, and they are more gross and grosser. And later are more difficult to practice than earlier, and therefore they are more subtle. And again, if you see, among generosity and moral discipline, I think generosity is more easy, for most people. Even though for certain individual, due to their previous imprint, it can be slightly different, because due to our previous karmic imprint, maybe some people by birth, maybe they have naturally more, better meditation concentrations, but maybe they might struggle with generosity because they don't have so much imprint of that. Or they might struggle with the, other practice such as patience, so forth. But in generally, we don't talk from past, previous, and familiarity, and that, in generally speaking, the practice of generosity is easier than the practice of moral discipline. The practice of moral discipline is easier than the practice of patience, whereas patience is more difficult than the practice of moral discipline. The practice of joyous effort in the virtues is more difficult than the patience, and patience more easier than that. The practice of karma abiding, shamatha, is more easier than patience, and patience is more easier than the joyous effort. So is easier than the karma abiding, and the wisdom is more difficult than the karma abiding or shamatha, whereas shamatha and karma abiding is more easier than the wisdom. And so from that perspective, again, that's how it is explained in terms of that. And then there is the quotations to kind of from the ornament of the Mahayana Sutra by Maitreya. So then it comes to one of the main point here, then the main point, the stages to which to train in them, and it has 2 points. And then first point is how to train in contact in general. So contact here means bodhisattva's contact or bodhisattva's practices in general. So how to engage into the practice of bodhisattvas, bodhisattva practice or contact in general, And that one also has 2, and within that, extensive explanation how to train in general, contact in general, and that also had 2 points. And within that, the training perfections, ripening one's own Buddha's qualities, and then within that, it is 6. That is the 6 perfections, So, yeah, in terms of practicing the Bodhisattva path, ripening your own potentials, practice to ripening your own potentials, and then practice to ripening others' potentials. In terms of ripening your own potential, then the practice of 6 perfections. In terms of ripening the potential of others, the practice of 4 means of gathering the disciple or the sentient beings, and then ripening them through the practice, those 4 means. So generally, again, it is more generalizing. And then within the point of to ripening your own potentials, and then the 6 perfections, the perfection of generosity, moral discipline, patience, joyous effort in virtues, meditative concentration, wisdom. And then first, in terms of generosity, it has 3 points. And then the entity or nature of generosity, what does generosity means? So explaining what does generosity means, So here, what we mean by generosity when we talk about the practice of generosity, okay, from the point of view of 6 perfections, the practice of perfection of generosity, here is saying, the generosity here refers to mental state, mental attitude, mental state. It's a virtuous intentions to give or to practice generosity. It's a mental intentions, give, and that mental attitude or intentions to give, and then also the mental attentions at the time of giving with the body and speech. That is the main. So therefore is the intention to give and the action, body and speech motivated by the intentions. So even that, it is the intention at the time of your act of giving, physically, bodily, or speech, by speech in generosity. So here, when you talk about practice of generosity, the intentions, the mind is more important than the action itself, so emphasizing on that. Is the main generosity is not just giving physically or verbally. It involves the intentions, the virtuous intention to give. And so here what is emphasizing is, when you don't have the virtuous intention to give, but you feel obligated, do you get it? Or being pressured by individuals, society, whatever, and you give, it seems like it's generosity and giving from action-wise. But here it is not the real generosity practice we are talking about here, because it doesn't come through that good intention, virtuous intentions of wanting to help, wanting to give. And so emphasizing on that part, And again, it is always, it's very interesting, when you learn the Dharma, it always comes back to the mind, always come back to the mind. And that is one of the huge difference that you find in Buddhism. The Buddha always, even when he talk about different aspects of the practice, generosity, moral discipline, all of that, even though physical and verbal actions are involved, but always the main important coming always back to the mind. Because in generally speaking, we always relate generosity with the physical act of giving, Or we might think, oh, he is very generous, she's generous because he or she gave. But sometimes if it doesn't come with a good virtuous intention, then it does not become real generosity or pure generosity as it can be, And so always reminding ourselves to always trying to bring the right intentions, right motivations. Sometimes it comes naturally, Sometimes it comes naturally. You are inspired to give. You have naturally, you have been very much touched, inspired to give, and you want to help, you want to give. But sometimes it doesn't come all the time, Sometimes you are not inspired to give, but you feel like you are obligated or pressured to give. So when that happens, training our mind intentionally trying to bring the good intention, motivation to give. That way, then your act of giving, generosity, become more pure, more powerful. So, so that is where why emphasizing very much on that. And so then kind of to go more detail here Lama Tsongkhapa says, and that comes from Shantideva. Shantideva's was a way of life that he as he gives. So perfecting and completing the practice of generosity doesn't depend on being eliminating poverty of all sentient beings by giving our all gift or wealth or substances. Rather, one can perfect and complete the practice of generosity, through destroying your internal grasping of miserliness and truly completing your familiarity or familiarization mind of giving to others along with the effect of giving. So what here it means is there are few aspects here that we understand from this. One, in order to perfect and complete your practice of generosity, if you have to eliminate all the poverty of the world, of all sentient beings, then next question, did Buddha perfect and completed generosity or not? If he has not perfected, completed generosity, then he has not completed the sixth perfection. If he has, but there is still poverty in the world, how come? How come there is still poverty in the world? Why Buddha? So here is Buddha completed and perfected generosity, not necessarily kind of eliminating all the poverty, but by training his mind without any clinging and grasping, without any attachment, without any miserliness. Not only that, so that is one aspect, not having any grasping out of miserliness to the object. That is one aspect. Second aspect is not only that, but also training your mind, the wish to give, the wish to practice generosity is also there. It's not just not having grasping and not having attachment, but go beyond that. That's one. Go beyond that, not having attachment, because sometimes you might not have attachment, but maybe you might not have also wish to give, I might have things which I'm not attached to, but then neither I feel like I want to give. Do you get it? So not only not having the attachment and not having miserliness, but also the wish training, having perfected the wish to give. And then third aspect here is along with the effect of giving, say not only you give whatever object that you practice generosity, but also giving the result of your practice also to others. The result of your practice of giving, also dedicating and giving to others. Because sometimes we might give something, but we might want the result, better result, more wealth for me in the futures, more merit for me in the futures, And so not only you give, but then also whatever merit, whatever virtues, whatever result that we have created from giving, also dedicating that for others. So together with the object and their effect, the result of that practice, also giving to others. So through training and learning in that and perfecting and completing that, then someone perfect the practice of generosity. And so again, it is important, You don't need to, maybe it is agreeing or not agreeing. He's saying, you all are talking about a lot of generosity, but here Nobody's feeding me. Oh, you all are discussing so much of generosity giving. Where is my food? Give me something. And so to perfect the practice of generosity, you don't have to be rich. That is the thing. Okay? You might be the most poor person in the world, and you can perfect and complete the practice of generosity. Like Milarepa. You know. On the other hand, you might be the most rich person in the world, and you might not complete the practice of generosity. So the main point is not about how much you have. It's more about your mentality, your mental ability to give, to share. So I think that is because sometimes we might feel, because I don't have so much, therefore I cannot practice the generosity. Your practice with generosity shouldn't be restrained or what do you call some like kind of put in the cage, restricted maybe. There was another word with C, but I was constrained. Yeah, that was the word I'm looking for. It shouldn't be constrained or restricted by the wealth. Is training of your mind. Is important for us to remember that. So then, yeah. And in terms of the subdivisions, again, it has 2 points. And from the point of view of individual basis, the practitioners, in terms of the practitioners basis. So in the Bodhisattva's vow for liberations, so generally speaking, of course, again, in general, the practice of material possessions, wealth should be practiced by the householder, Bodhisattva's practitioners. And the practice of giving, the generosity dharma, should be practiced by the the ordained Bodhisattva practitioners. So that is generally in terms of that. That is kind of because generally speaking, the household have more than the ordained ones, especially at the Buddha's time, definitely, when they have nothing. Nowadays, maybe in some cases, it might have changed. It might have reversed in some cases. Where some lamas, monks might be driving Mercedes. And living in a millions house. But generally speaking, and in most cases, the ordained people's practitioners have less, and and so they are more encouraged to practice the generosity of Dharma, and then householders are more encouraged to practice the generosity of material things, supposedly because they have more, And so again, in the Shantideva's compendium of the training, it is said, for the monks, the ordained, not the monks, monks, nuns, ordained ones. It is said, by practicing the generosity and in order of material things for the ordained ones, And in order to make those material things, if they have to, if it is disturb their studying, meditations, practice, and it disturbs their keeping of the vows, precept, moral discipline, then it is not a good. While you are practicing one virtues, you are breaking many other virtues, And again, it is something for us to reflect, sometimes. We try to help one sentient beings, and in process of that, we hurt so many others. We think we are helping, but what you are doing by helping one, you are hurting many others. And sometimes we don't think that part. Someone made some comment recently, I don't remember, in one conversation. It kind of made me to think, in order to feed, whether it's one human beings or whether it's in order to feed one animal, your pet, so many other animals have been killed. We think we are helping that, whether it's a human being or whether it's the pet, whatever, practicing generosity, compassion. But actually so many sentient, so many other animals are being killed in order to feed those, our pets or human beings. And it's something that kind of makes me to think, because so many are being killed every day for that purpose. So not only for the human beings, for others, other animals, our own pets and so forth, And so again, is remembering that and trying to keep them in prayers in our mind, where many others are being kind of killed, for that. However, if the ordained ones, if they have many wealth without having to give up their practice, meditations, without having to break their moral discipline and precepts and vows, if they naturally, due to their previous strong merit and karma, they get a lot of offerings and wealth, and then they are, because that one, even though they have wealth because of their previous karma merit, but that doesn't disturb and break their other virtues practice. And so therefore, in those cases, then you can utilize that, what you have, to practice generosity in order to help and benefit others. But not in order to help someone, for them to engage into a business to cheating others, that is not for a monk or ordains. Of course, it's also same for the lay. Also, when we talk about livelihood, livelihood. When we talk about the 8 noble path, one of them is livelihood. And so similarly, especially for the ordained ones, in order to help someone, you get into some kind of business or investment where you cheat and exploit in others. So therefore, in that way, then you are breaking your vows, your precepts, your discipline in order to practice generosity, and such is not encouraged. Such is, but if you don't have to do that and it's naturally come, then the practice of generosity of that is encouraged. So that is where it is. Without hurting the other virtuous activities, And Katamba Geshe Sherab, said, he said, to you, of course, referring to his disciple, and mostly the ordained must be an ordained one. I will not talk about advantage of giving. Because if I talk about advantage of giving, then you will think of practicing generosity. And in order to practice generosity of material things, then you will try to think of making wealth, you know. That is how our mind works sometimes. Then you think, oh, I have to make a lot of money so that I can practice generosity, so I can help. And in that, if it doesn't destroy other virtues, then that is okay, but it does, yes.
A related question, as Buddhists, how do we prepare for retirement? I mean, like the typical thing is to invest and to do whatever. All of those companies are usually tied into some kind of hurt in the world.
Yeah, I can see, I think a lot of Buddhists little bit get kind of, well, you know, we just try to do our best. Maybe we try to invest in the company where there is less distractions and less, you know, we can invest in those corporations who produce, well, I mean, weapons or poisonous and all of those things. Or we can invest into something where it's less harmful to sentient beings, less harmful to the planet, and all of that, you know. So it's not that there is, so, and again, it also another way of looking at it is like, you know, like last elections, and maybe this, you know, some people says, you know, voting the less evil ones, you know, and sometimes when you have that, that is the lesser of two, you know, if there is any. Yes, please.
I think if you were to Google, I can't remember, but there might be even specific Buddhist screened investment opportunities, or, you know, investment organizations that are touting their nonviolence, their eco-consciousness. And I seem to remember that. I have no ideas myself, but if you were to Google, I'm almost certain there are dozens of specific investment companies that are doing the screening for you. At least that's their claim.
If there is enough investment here, I will start one from tomorrow. I will have to take everyone's hand and how much you want to invest, and then maybe I will start from tomorrow. Again, one of the things that we have to remember is, you know, we try to do as much as we can and not being overwhelmed by not being perfect. That is very important. As long as we are trying to get better, because sometimes it can be overwhelming, you know, feel like there is even a story of Ananda being totally overwhelmed, you know, because he realized if you take a bath, it kills. If you boil, it kills. If you walk, it kills. If you breathe, he kills. And it feels like you get like almost like frozen, you know, like almost like frozen, and you can't do anything. He became like that. And Ananda was very compassionate, extremely compassionate. And so he almost become like that, overwhelmed. And in that moment, you know, there is a verses where the Buddha kind of said, you know, don't be too overwhelmed by seeing the suffering of the sentient beings due to their own individual karmas, you know. So, and that helped him to be really bit kind of more relaxed, you know, and not being overwhelmed and frozen, you know. And sometimes I think when we study Dharma, I think sometimes that kind of that could arises in us, it feels like we cannot do anything, we cannot plan, we cannot do this and that, and so I think again, always lesser, going to the lesser one and how it can be reduced, whatever, and that is why we need to get out of samsara. When we are in samsara, there's no way that we cannot do anything without unintentionally hurting others, harming others. When I'm drinking water, I have no intention of hurting and harming anyone. But when you boil it, some insects are being kind of whatever virus, whatever that they are being kind of boiled, And so walking, breathing, everything just like Ananda. And so that is why needing to get out of samsara is so important. As long as we're in samsara, it's hard to not to do that. And also by also remembering, because everything that we do unintentionally, there is some kind of that contributions, and so therefore trying to keep all sentient beings in our prayer every day, dedication every day, and in that way we kind of trying to make most of it, within our ability, our own state of being. But I will talk about this advantage of grasping. So Sharawa said, but I will not talk about the advantage of generous to you, the ordained one, but I will talk about this advantage of grasping. And so that even though the monks might have just one ball, they might be still attached to that. Even though they might have just one text, they might be attached to that. Even though they might have one set of robe or two sets of robe, they could still be attached to that. Even though they might have just one picture of their teacher, they might be attached to that. And so he is saying, even you might have just one thing, you shouldn't get attached to it. You shouldn't be grasping to it. And therefore, I will talk about this advantage of grasping. The more you understand this advantage of grasping, then you will have less, you will practice more to let go of grasping and then not to have grasping to anything. And so then Lama Tsongkhapa making kind of comment on that, on the basis of that, Shara was saying that this talk is one who is not pleased with ordained one giving gifts, having toiled to obtain and accumulate wealth and often damage their ethic, so that is where sometime probably even at that time, Shara was or some monks, while they are trying to help and benefit other sentient beings through their practice of generosity, but in order to make those wealth, maybe they are engaging in business, other means to make those wealth that breaks their own ethic, moral, precept and vows, and he wasn't very pleased about that. And the comment that he makes is to, he wasn't pleased about that kind of behavior or actions. In one side, they are helping and benefiting others, but other side, they are breaking the main kind of their own precept, their own moral discipline and vows and so forth. And so, so it is in Tibetan, there is a saying, your footprint is kind of destroyed by your hand. And it's similar like that. You have footprint and then you kind of destroy it, and at the end there's no footprint to see, So you create one virtues, but you destroy by another non-virtues in that way, And at the end there is really not much to show, because it's kind of in balance, or sometimes even worse than balance.
You don't want to use that for your investment company.
Mm.
You don't want to use that as a slogan for your investment. You need to fibble it. Come up with something else.
Yeah, for that I will hire you.
Thank you. That's what I was aiming. Consultation fee.
I think we both communicated well and understood each other well enough. And then the subdivision of entity or nature of generosity itself. So then, you know, again, within that, and there are sometimes three, sometimes four kind of generosity, you know. Here it explained three. Sometimes here is generosity of Dharma, fearlessness, and material things. And sometimes they divide into four, and then generosity of love, you know. So, but sometimes that is included in the fearless or protections. So in terms of the practice of Dharma, you know, is to teach Dharma correctly, unmistakably, you know. And that means it doesn't have to be a teacher like on the throne, you know, or chair, high throne. You know, whenever you get opportunity to share, people are interested, people ask you that, and you share your knowledge, your wisdom, Dharma, as much as accurate, as much as unmistaken, as much as according to our ability. You know, we can only, that is another point I always point out, according to our present ability. You know, we think at the moment we have provided the unmistaken and correct information because that is how much we know at the moment. Maybe that might be wrong, but in our understanding of that, we provide that. In the future, as we learn more, maybe that wasn't maybe exactly as accurate, but we shouldn't be so bad about it. It's all about doing your best according to your ability at your state at that time. Otherwise, we will be full of guilt in a whole life. You know, you will live with your, because when we're small, you know, we do things according to our ability. And now we look back, you know, what we did is kind of not good. But sometime at that point, we thought that was the best thing to do, according to our wisdom, according to our understanding of things. And so that keep on evolving, you know, that keep on evolving as we get more enlightened, as we get better. And so therefore, I think at least that is my attitude, you know, because I've seen a lot of people who are so feeling of so negative and guilt because in certain point in their life, they thought that was the best thing to do because that is whatever limited information you might have, whatever, according to that was decision you make best. And now we have more compared to that time. Now we have more informations. So when you have more information, maybe you might have made your decision differently. Do you get it? But you shouldn't be so bad and guilty, all of that, because that is your best understanding at that point with limited information that is, or you had. So if you compare now with all more information and more understanding and the decision that, then it might seem that was not the right decision or not correct decision and all of that. But again, we shouldn't compare that all the time. Otherwise, you always feel, you know, full of negative in your mind, guilt, something you cannot change, past, but you still hang on that. Your mind still hang on that, and it's not healthy. And we have to move forward, you know. And so then to teach logically, you know, with the reasoning and that, without misdeed, the worldly, and then also, with the right intention, motivations, trying to give other knowledge, whatever knowledge, not only Dharma knowledge, other knowledge, whatever arts, science, craft, whatever different knowledge that we might have, skills, knowledge that we might have with the right intention, motivation, sharing, giving to others is kind of included as the site of the Dharma, even though it's not actual Dharma itself, that knowledge itself, not necessarily, or could be due to your right intention, motivations, but with the right intention and motivations, sharing all those different knowledge that you might have, not only the Dharma knowledge, but also outside of the Dharma, other knowledge as well. And then generosity or fearlessness, or protections, is to help to protect others from the fear of humans. Maybe sometimes we see, whatever they are fear of, whatever, whether it's animal, whether it's human beings, whether it's different beings, when they have fear of human beings, by leaders, kings, robots, so forth, or the fear of non-human beings, whatever kind of animal and so forth, or element, we try to protect them, try to save them, try to protect them in whatever way we can. And again, one of the that you often see, in the Tibetan culture, or also like all the Himalayan regions in Nepal, India, Mongolia, where very much influenced by the Tibetan Buddhism, in those cultures, from very young age, the parent teach the children, when they see an insect, being in the water, being drowning, kind of helping them keep in a safe place, That is the practice of generosity, fearlessness, protections, expanding the life or giving a new life, and also I always wonder, maybe you have, maybe someone can give me explanations. Like when you have rain, from nowhere, all the snails comes. How does that come? Yes, David? Yeah?
No.
So I always wonder, after the rain, when I go walk, then I can see snails. And you never, other days you don't see, and I just wonder, where did they come from? Any idea? I've been wondering that.
I know that worms come up because they'll drown them.
Yeah. But does the snail are in the ground normally?
Well, they're coming from someplace where.
They hide at the bottom of rocks or underneath.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're just disrupted, so they have to come up. Or they come down from the cloud.
If it is by the ocean, then I can kind of understand. But like even here, very dry places, and suddenly after the rain, every morning, you see so many snails. And
there is some weather phenomena that creates such a condition that frogs do come down from the clouds. No, I'm totally serious.
yeah.
I'm completely serious. I'll bet you all the money in my investment, which is about $3. So, no, but there is a phenomenon where yeah, but I don't know. I'll look that up on snails.
There are some species of, say, fish,
Uh-huh.
of that kind of animal that will be dormant until the right conditions. Now, the snails, I think, are just hiding. My mother had this property where a creek came out at certain times of the year, but not others. And when the water was there, the fish were there. And otherwise, it's hard to say even where they were, but they were dormant. They were just lying, or And so there are different things for all kinds of animals.
So anyway, moving on. Moving on that, so like those cases, just picking up and putting in some, because some you see very often crash by car or by human beings, and so that would be another form of like this, the generosity of protections, fearless, and liberating animals that are being going to be slaughtered, and that way we save their life, give them protections from the fear of being killed.
They just become more active when it rains.
Okay.
Because they're very vulnerable to drying out. So when it's raining, they come out. So you probably just see them more.
Mm-hmm.
You want a specific answer, right? Like,
No,
this is not acceptable.
It's
the answer from Mr. Snell.
Is not acceptable, but still, like if I go in my garden and if I try to open all my rocks, I don't know whether I will see snail now.
Well, because when you're looking for them, they're fast.
So that was like kind of curious. I was just curious in recent times. So the practice of generosity, and then practice of the material, which is more clear, and then so practice of, so again, even though it is kind of subdivided into three, but it doesn't, like giving your time, the practice of generosity, time, volunteering your time, your skills, whatever, those are practice of generosity. Shouldn't be so literally in any of those threes, and I think that is another things that sometimes just being for there someone, just listening, being there, giving your time, your so anything that we can share, anything that we can give, external, internal, with the intention to give, and then with a virtuous intention to give, and out of that, then we try to give and practice generosity. So we'll have a
246. May all beings everywhere plagued by the sufferings of body and mind
obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtues of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again.
May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. 245, prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And 244, the short long life prayer for Lama Zopa Rinpoche.
Tō chāng shīn chāng kuen chā wē, tēn zīn yōng bē wē kūn sō tō pō zē. Chō sōng kū wē lē mō tū tū, pā dā sō dū jē, kuen dū shā tēn shō. So maybe also we can keep in our prayers, one of the Sangha member from Taos have passed yesterday suddenly. And so you can keep her name is Sherry Wilson, and in your prayers, and of course all other sentient beings who have died, passed away. And again, as I was saying at the very beginning in the motivation, no one expected. She wasn't sick. I mean, she was having some migraine and that, but then suddenly, and she's not so old either. So you never know, it came suddenly to her, unexpectedly. She, her family, no one expected. Neither all the Sangha members, we were all kind of shocked and unbelievable, but it could happen to anyone, anytime, never know. And so, because we tend to take granted that time is on our side all the time. Even though we talk, even though we study, even though we sometimes contemplate, meditate about the life being very short. We talk about date of time is so uncertain, it could come anytime. And we contemplate a little bit. And we have experienced that experience many times in our life over the years. But still, on everyday level, we still feel it's not going to happen. Still, when someone goes like that, we're still kind of shocked. Feel like unexpected, which is expected, but to us we feel like it's unexpected, sudden, and so because we still have so strong grasping of permanent, so strong grasping permanent, even after talking, studying, even contemplating, still we don't feel that today might be my last day. This week might be my last week. This month might be my last month. This year might be my last year. We don't feel that way, isn't it? We still feel there is time on our side. And so I think I was saying is kind of, those things is kind of wake up call for those who are still alive, So anyway, thank you. Thank you very much.